Go on. It's almost the end of Festive Tech Calendar 2024. I'm absolutely delighted to be here today to talk to you a bit about setting up your first meetup or community. Um, I hope you all, first of all, had a wonderful festive season if you've been celebrating, and I hope that you're all ready for the new year ahead as well. New Year is a great time to be thinking about doing a bit more in the community. Hopefully, this session will help you think a bit more about how you can take your first steps. So this session is all about the practical steps that you might want to take in setting up a tech meetup. It's equally relevant if you're thinking about making other community contributions, doing other activities out there in the community. And we'll also talk a little bit about some of the common mistakes that people make along the way. So hopefully you can find out what not to do as well as what works really well. First of all, before we start the session, I want to talk a little bit about Festive Tech Calendar. So, as many of you know, Festive Tech Calendar is a month-long activity full of community contributions from across the UK and across the world. But a big part of Festive Tech Calendar is also charity. So please do be generous. The chosen charity this year is the Beatson Cancer Charity. You can find out much more about that and look at all of the other sessions at festivetechcalendar.com. Today is all about taking those practical steps in setting up your first tech meetup. So let's have a look. Let's get started. So first of all, let's have a little think about what a community actually is. So technical community, simply put, is about bringing individuals together that have a common interest in a specific technology or field. So these communities contain professionals, enthusiasts, experts, and people that basically want to come together to exchange knowledge, collaborate on projects, and support each other in their technical endeavors. So there's a few ideas below on what makes a community. For example, knowledge sharing, collaboration, networking with each other, events, a big part of community, of course, as well, but also supporting each other and providing mentorship and more. And it's important to say that we don't have to have an event to create community. There are many different ways of doing this. So as you can see, you can achieve your community through meetups, for example. That's what a lot of people are often thinking about doing. But also you can interact with people on online forums. You can use social media. You could think about how you could put together a conference or how you could work with an existing conference. You can mentor people, either helping organize sessions or just doing a one-to-one mentorship. And you can also get started with things like workshops and hackathons. And there's way more. I could go on. But the really important bit is, why should you do this? It's okay. It's fine. You don't have to feel bad that there are going to be professional reasons, maybe why you want to set up a community for the first time. It's really, a real benefit of community activity is that personal and professional growth. It really will help you with your career. It can help, motivate yourself. It can help you maybe think about what's next as well. Um, Another reason why you should do it is helping build connections to other communities. So it's not just one-dimensional. Communities don't exist in silos, but they interact with each other, and people are often part of many communities. Um, you get opportunities to learn from each other. So learn from the people that attend meetups or communities that you're part of, learn from other speakers or other leaders, and also learn from the experience of being a community organizer. It's a really good opportunity to meet people from other companies. So perhaps if you want to find other people that do the same kind of role as yourself, or just network with others to find out what it's like. Above all, and this really genuinely is my experience, running a meetup or community is fun. It gives you really positive energy. So definitely encourage you to jump in and give it a go. However, before you kick off with your meetup, you really should think about a few things along the way. So first of all, is there an audience for your meetup? What is your meetup or community all about? Is it about a specific programming language such as .NET, Java, Python, etc.? Is it a technology area? Is it all about Microsoft Azure? Or is it about AWS or something else? Think about who the people are that are going to come to your meetup and what's going to bring them together. It could be a shared technology interest. It could be something geographical. But also, while you're doing that, think about, I don't want to use the word competitor. We're not talking about business here, we're talking about community, but do think about whether there is a gap in the community. If there isn't a gap, then is there perhaps another community that you could join forces with to work together and help each other? You know, do you want to create from new, or do you want to leverage what's already there and help others grow or grow together? Secondly, what resources do you need to get started? So um, I think the who is really one of the most important things. Who's available to help you? Communities are rarely successful when there's just one person leading everything. You might think that you can take all of these things on and that it's baby steps, and that can be fine to start with, but you do also need to think about what's going to happen when you get busy, or if there's a family matter that comes up, or or work is really intense, or perhaps even your community is just so successful that it's too big for one person to handle. So who's going to be around to help you on that journey? The second thing is what sort of funding is available. So this isn't always a concern, but certainly if you don't have lots of resources at your fingertips, you're going to need to think about where that money is going to come from. So, as an example, if you were organising an in-person meetup, you might be lucky enough to have an employer that already has a space that you can use, and you can leverage that, and use that space, and you're going to be even luckier. And not only do they have the space, but they're going to provide some soft drinks and some food and some snacks. Well, that's brilliant. But most of us aren't in that fortunate situation. We often have to work with other organisations. Now, it doesn't have to be money. I have used the word funding. It doesn't always have to be that money changes hands. It could be that, for example, there's a local employer that would be happy to give up some space. And then there might be another company that's happy to pay for the pizzas. You don't necessarily have to think about handling cash, but do think about the things that might be expected along the way. And I've just mentioned, which organisations might be on board to support. So typically, you would look for sponsors to help with a meetup, for example, and that could be small sponsorship. It could be based on one individual event, or it could be a long-term agreement. But make sure that everyone is clear on what the expectations are along the way and what people get in return for the time, the resources, and potentially the money that they're going to put in. And then also think about which other communities that you could partner with. So perhaps some other people already have access to a space. Could you leverage that? Could you work together with them to put that meetup together? This is also equally as relevant, by the way, for online meetups as well. There might not be so much concern about physical space or pizza, but there's how you get the word out there. What technologies you're using to bring people together. Thirdly, how will you sustain and grow? So a lot of people often just think about that very first event. They don't think about, how many events are you going to have to do? How are you going to grow that community over time? So, do you have a plan? What sort of content do you have in mind? For example, if you're thinking of setting up a broad community that's in geographical space, are you going to do different themed topics every few months? And where are those speakers going to come from? Do you already have connections, or that other people who can introduce you to others? Or would you do an open process for speaker recruitment? Could you add volunteers over time? So this really goes back to who is available to help you. But will people jump in and help you out along the way? And also, what's the backup if life gets in the way? So if something happens that means that you can't, for example, host a meetup, whether that's online or in person, either temporarily or even permanently, what's the plans for someone to be able to help you out with that? Okay, now let's talk about the different types of meetup. So broadly, there are three categories: in person, online, or hybrid. Both of those two together. And there are benefits and drawbacks for each one. So let's talk about in person first. So in person meetups are perhaps quite often the more memorable meetups, because people have a multi-dimensional experience of that. They don't just see the talk, but they meet with people physically in person, be drawn together over food, drinks as well. It's a great opportunity for those people to network. But there are some drawbacks to in person, particularly the logistics and the expense of doing so. Online, um, easy to get started for sure. And no commitments often doesn't really cost much. It can in some ways be easier to source speakers, and I've said sourcing speakers is simpler. It isn't always simpler. It doesn't mean that people are always as eager to do an online talk as they are in person, but certainly you can draw people from a bigger geographical area. You don't need to think about how people are going to pay for that train or car journey to get to your meetup. But on the other hand, online can be harder to drive demand, and you don't have the same networking experience as an in-person, although there's certainly things you can do to think about how people can have a great time online. And then there's hybrid. Now, I'm going to put my hands up here and say, not my favorite experience, hybrid. A few reasons why. I mean, to sum it up, it's tricky. To give everyone a good experience in a hybrid event, you often need really expensive kit. So you might, if you're going to do a hybrid event, first of all, you need to do that in-person setup. So you need your venue. You also need your online environment. So you need to think about how you're going to get that out there. But you also need to think about, for example, your speaker needs to have a clear picture. You need to be able to see your speaker. You need to be able to see those slides, but you also need to be able to, hear them really well. So there's a microphone for the speaker. What about when people in the audience start asking questions? One of the problems that often happens is people don't wait for that microphone to come round. They just shout out and they have a different experience. And that can lead to people online being felt maybe feeling like they've been left behind a little bit. But also, it is possible sometimes to skew it so much towards the online experience that people that are in person don't have a great experience either. So for that reason, I usually don't recommend hybrid, although if you really know what you're doing from a technical perspective, can still pull it off. So don't say never, but I would recommend you start with an in-person or an online approach and not both. And I would even say that if you want to do both in person and online, it could be easier to do two separate events than trying to do one hybrid event. So see if your speakers can come back and do that same session for an online community as well. It'll be so much better if they're speaking to a screen rather than speaking to a room where there's a camera pointing at them. Okay, so next I'm going to talk a little bit about the online experience. Now, I'm using a piece of software, well, an online environment called StreamYard, and I can actually even show you right now. I can drag my screen in, just what it looks like. It's that horrible effect, so I'm just going to do that for a second. What you get is a really easy sort of drag and drop, click to change. I'm not going to do that too much. Lots of customization, easy to change backgrounds, lots of different videos, easy to bring in slides and to play videos. And I find this the ideal kit for producing any sort of online video. This is a pre-recorded video, but you could also use this for online as well. However, it does come with a fee, of course. So, there is a cost. Now, that cost will vary depending on whether you're paying in dollars or British pounds or what currency. So check the website. I also want to highlight Restream as well, which does a very similar job to StreamYard. Again, the real benefits to this is that it's it's online, it's easy to broadcast to multiple sources. You don't need a powerful setup. But for those power users amongst you, you might want to think about something like OBS or even vMix. Really, I recommend this for experts only. First of all, lots of time to set up, but also you do need a more powerful tech setup. So normally you're going to need a powerful desktop, or perhaps like I have an M series Mac to actually be able to use that kit. Now, OBS is open source software, so it is free. vMix is not. And of course, there are many other alternatives to what I've just presented to you on screen. This is just a sample of some of the technology that you can use to produce your online event. What about where you're going to broadcast to? So benefit of all of these three is that you don't have to choose just one. You could put your online event on YouTube, on LinkedIn, you could put it on X or Twitter, whatever we're calling that these days. You can stream it to Zoom, Teams live events, Twitch. The one that I will highlight is things like Threads and Blue Sky, not yet supported, but really most places you can broadcast to. Some of these are better than others. For example, in StreamYard, if you are using YouTube or Twitch, you can actually receive the comments from the live chat directly in. And I believe with StreamYard, you can even bring people into the room directly. So if I think this is called I've forgotten the actual name, but there's a StreamYard sort of live streaming experience where you can even invite people to join you in the studio, which isn't via YouTube, but it is possible. And I should also mention with the likes of Restream and StreamYard, you can have usually up to 10 people in a recording studio at any one time. So it can be a really good experience for people. And some of these environments, such as streaming to a Teams live events, a bit more manual. But I just want you to know this is all possible, and it means that if you're thinking about where to stream to, maybe that's not so much of a worry. You don't have to choose. But what I would say is, do make sure that when you are advertising your event, that you try and point people roughly to the same place. For example, in the company I work for, we usually use a StreamYard event room, and we get people to RSVP. And this is for webinar type events, but the same thing would apply to a meetup. But even though we ask people to RSVP for that, so we know roughly how many people are coming, we do always put those videos out to YouTube and LinkedIn as well, just in case people have missed it, and so they can join us live on there, just for a slightly different experience. Okay, so let's move on now and talk a little bit more about in-person. So first of all, obvious thing that you'll need to think about is sourcing the venue. Now, we've already touched upon this a bit. Think about companies that could support you. Think about whether there might be community spaces that are available. Is there a community centre, a church hall? Is there a technology incubator that will provide space for free or a low cost to meetups? But also, who are the local employers that have a shared tech interest in the topic that you're covering? Can you use their space? Think about when it's going to be. So, for example, I'm in the UK. I would always recommend in the UK that meetups are run from Tuesday to Thursday if they're going to be in person. And that is because, especially in London, but also across the country, the days that people go into the office are typically Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So Monday and Friday, particularly Friday, are not usually successful nights for us. And of course, neither is the weekend, but that will vary depending on where you are in the world. Second thing, you got your venue? Great. Is it easy to get to? Where's the local trains? What time are the last trains? Is there a bus connection? How about parking? Perhaps if it's not in a city centre, is it easy to drive to? Just think about that. Think about the timings. Think about how you can make it really easy for people. The other thing to think about with timings is, what time do people finish work? That might vary depending on where you are. But typically, in London, we will start events at around 6 p.m. People will often finish work between 5:30 and 6. We want to give them a good half hour. Another thing to think about with timings is perhaps having a networking at the start of the event to allow people to gradually arrive, instead of having we're starting at 6 and the talk starts at 6:05 and then people are still arriving at 20 past. Not a great experience for attendees, and probably not a great experience for your speaker either, getting distracted by people coming in. So create a bit of buffer time there. And think about charges. I never recommend charges for attendees with meetups. Of course, you can charge for larger conference type events, but your venue may still be charging you, and that's why it's so important to think about who can help you cover the cost, because we don't want you as an individual community organizer to have to worry too much about that. So think about food and drinks. This is an important other cost consideration. So you might be lucky and have a venue that can provide food, but on the other hand, if that isn't being paid for by someone, sometimes that can be expensive. It depends. You'll need to work out with the venue as to whether food can be brought in from outside. In the UK, pizza is often very popular, and for a bulk order can often attract some good discounts, so that can often work. But you will also need to think, of course, about dietary requirements. So not just vegetarians, but vegans, religious requirements, and other dietaries such as allergens, gluten-free, or in my own case, I follow a low carb diet. So is there something that isn't pizza? I've just told you to go and order pizza because it's good value, but not everyone, including myself, will actually eat that pizza. So just have a little thought about, are there a couple of other things for them? From a drinks perspective, it is absolutely crucial that you do provide some sort of soft drinks. At bare minimum, water. You cannot get away with not providing that. You should provide soft drinks ideally, and preferably tea and coffee is nice to have, but do provide some options. Alcoholic beverages, that depends. Now, I've heard a lot of different opinions on this. I also realize that some people having a couple of drinks in moderation is a fun part of the meetup experience. It will depend on where you are on your local customs. So take this as a guide for the UK. You can either provide a moderate amount of alcoholic drinks alongside soft drinks, and always alongside soft drinks, not instead of, to make sure you give people a choice. Or you could possibly think about whether there's a social after the main meetup itself. So, for example, I recently helped organise a meetup where the venue didn't allow alcoholic drinks, and so afterwards people went to the local pub. I should mention that most people at the pub didn't drink alcoholic drinks. They had zero alcohol beers or soft drinks. A minority of us had alcoholic drinks. So always think about how you can make people feel included with food and drink. And then on to the event itself, have a checklist. So make sure you've got a list together. There are loads of different people online that have put together event checklists. What to think about. Have you collected the right details that the building security or reception might need in your venue? Email addresses, names. Do they need the employer name or job title? It will vary. Don't forget your AV setup as well. Do you have all of the right adapters? What cables does the room come with? Has a screen even been provided? Ask these questions in advance, and it'll make it so much easier on the day. Get others involved, delegate, give other people responsibilities. And my favourite thing is when you go to a meetup as an organiser and one of the sponsors has taken care of things for you. Can they take care of the food and drinks? There's nothing better than just turning up and focusing on speaking to people that are attending, and speaking to the working with the speakers and thinking about the content, as opposed to having to worry about all of the logistical concerns. Okay, so one thing we haven't talked about is, well, how are people going to find out about this? So there will again there are many different ways of promoting your event. And I know that there are people in the community that have been building event platforms as well. I'm going to talk about two platforms that we regularly encounter in London. These are just examples. In London, meetup.com is definitely the most popular platform for people discovering meetups. Now, it does come with a fee, and that starts at about £20 per month, and there are different options. You can have a look on their website. For example, you need a more premium subscription to collect certain questions from attendees. So if you need to ask custom things or do custom surveys, you might need to think about that more premium package. But all of the meetup.com services are paid for. There is a system called Meetup Pro where other companies or other communities can pay for a meetup on your behalf. You might find out about that. I'll talk about that briefly at the end. What I like about Meetup is it's certainly in London, it's the most effective at getting RSVPs, at getting people to say yes. Two reasons for that. First of all, there's the cross-group discovery. So let's say you were setting up a .NET group in a city, and that city already had an Azure group. Well, that would be, you would find that there are people in that other meetup group that would probably be interested in your meetup. And through the meetup platform, they'd actually get recommended, or they'd be able to see that other things are happening, or they'd be able to see that other people in their group have joined this other group. So there's that cross-discovery aspect. And the other thing is Meetup generally is quite low friction to say yes to attending that. So there is a downside. When it's really easy for people to say yes, sometimes the dropout can be a little bit higher, but generally it drives the most attendance. Now, Eventbrite is also an option as well. And until recently, all free events were free to host on Eventbrite, but my understanding is recently that's changed. So I know that it's certainly, at the time of recording this, still free for under 25 people events, but you might well want your meetup to have more than 25 people. Although it can be free, and certainly it's easier to set up one event in Eventbrite than have to set up a whole meetup in Meetup. It's got that higher friction for discoverability. You really need to be able to find people and tell them that Eventbrite is there. They're not just going to find you on that platform. But on the other hand, if they have found you, there might be that lower drop off, and you can certainly ask more questions on Eventbrite. So think about what's going to work for you. Generally speaking, UK, I recommend meetup.com, but you might have other platforms that you use in your area. Let us know if that's the case. The other thing you need to think about is how you're going to get speakers. So I often use a tool called Sessionize. Sessionize is a very powerful tool for call for speakers, and it is currently free for community events. So that's community events that are organized by the community for the community, i.e. not commercial events. You can't organize, for example, Microsoft couldn't go and organize a free event on Sessionize as being a Microsoft branded event, because that's not a community event. But a meetup group that's talking about Microsoft technologies could use Sessionize to organize a free event. So community organized and free are the two big rules. And it's very, very powerful and very customizable. I won't be going into that and into exactly all of the things you can do. But you can, two things to highlight is you can either do a call for speakers for an individual event, or you can do a long-term call for speakers for an entire season. One thing I'm not going to touch upon, because I could be talking all day if I do, is you also should think about how you can use social media channels and word of mouth to promote the fact that your meetup group exists, or that you are searching for speakers. So think about whether that's on LinkedIn or Blue Sky or Threads or Twitter or any of these platforms. What is powerful in your area, and how you're going to get the message out. There is typically no need to pay for adverts for a meetup group. But always think about how you can ask people to share your message. So it's not just set up a page and promote your event. It's who can help you, who can share that, who can push that message out to their community as well. So get other people involved in shouting about that. Now, before I wrap up, I'm going to talk about a few don'ts. I don't want to end on the don'ts, so there is going to be one more slide after this, but there are a few don'ts that I found up over time, and you probably have some other don'ts or some things that you've seen gone wrong before. The biggest don't is, and the first two contradict each other, of course, don't run your meetups too often, but also don't run your meetups too intermittently. So try and find the right cadence to run your event. If you run your meetups too often, you'll be tired, but your community, your audience will also be tired as well. If, on the other hand, you run your meetups too intermittently, then people will kind of forget that you're there. In the UK, I tend to recommend every 2 to 3 months is a great cadence. It doesn't matter if you slip to 4 months every so often. Sometimes things get in the way. This time of year is a great example. Sometimes you might have done an event in November, and for whatever reason, the next one is in March. It's not the end of the world. But if you can't run an event, make sure you think about still communicating with your community. Perhaps you run a regular in-person event and you're really going to struggle to do an in-person one in a time frame. Maybe you could do an online special, or you could do a collaboration with another group just to keep that momentum going. I've said this many times, don't go it alone. Make sure you ask for help. Get people involved. They don't necessarily have to be a co-leader. They could just be volunteers that help you, but make sure you've got other people around you that can support you, both just in terms of sharing that work, but also in case anything goes wrong. Don't take too much responsibility for speaking. So make sure you think about getting a varied range of community members involved. And I would recommend that not only do you get some senior members of the community involved, but you also provide an environment where people can speak for the first time at your event. You can use Sessionize to do this, bring completely new people in, or you could, for example, encourage people to mentor a new speaker so that encourage someone to bring their experience to the table. And you could also make it easier for people by doing short lightning talks for new speakers as well. But don't make it the you show. People, I'm sure, will be interested to see you speak, but they'll want to hear other voices as well. Another thing not to do is to fund significant expenses out of pocket. Now, it's okay if every so often, for example, you might have to pay, you're going to have to pay the travel to get to your meetup venue. That's understandable. Or you might decide to get started with your community, the meetup.com costs. But I would really recommend that you bring in sponsors or get other people to help with that, so that you don't feel like your community is the financial burden. Organising is enough. You don't need to take on everything, all of the costs yourself, and certainly don't think about spending significant funds on food or drink. And then the last not to do, and I'm sure there will be more, please let me know what your thoughts are, but don't cross over into commercial territory when you're running your meetup groups. It's not a sales exercise. It's fine to say who you work for. Notice I haven't said who I work for yet. I will at the end, I'll mention that, but it's not a sales exercise. You shouldn't be overtly trying to recruit people or get them to buy your services in a deliberate way. The fact that people come to your meetup, whether that's online or in person, will help you with that anyway. People will be more likely to engage with you in a commercial way if they see you as a great community leader. You don't need to push it, and don't push it. Think about community first. Think about why we're all together, why people want to come to these type of events. All right, so that's the knots out of the way. I want to finish by thinking about some of the things that could help you along the way. So we've talked about these throughout the session, such as bringing sponsors in, about getting people to help you promote things on social media, getting venues to support you. Another few ideas include whether your employer can give you some time off or time back to invest in community efforts. It's always worth asking. Community is a really great motivator for people in the workplace. So it actually benefits companies to invest in community. So there's nothing wrong with asking about that. Another thing that I touched on briefly is Meetup Pro networks. So I just wanted to talk about this quickly as well. So some examples on the right-hand side. Microsoft, for example, have a number of Meetup Pro networks, whether that's Azure groups or data groups. I think there are Power Platform and BizApp groups as well. And there are networks on the meetup.com platform where Microsoft not only pay the fee, but they will also put you on a big map of all of the different groups. There's also another Meetup Pro group called Global AI Community. It's also affiliated with Microsoft, but it is independently run. This is a fantastic group. They both do their own events, but they also bring people together around the world to run local chapters of Global AI. Certainly if you have an AI focused group, I definitely just look it up, Global AI Community. They're fantastic people. And again, it just takes off a little bit of the weight in terms of that meetup cost, but also it can really help with discoverability and other groups helping raise the profile of yours. Another couple of things you could try doing. So first of all, you could think about which Microsoft partners are aligned to tech area. I don't want to just make this about Microsoft. There are many different organizations out there. I, for example, am involved in running a Databricks meetup in London, and Databricks, of course, put support into that. They provide support for the venue. But you will also find partners of Microsoft and partners of Amazon and Google and all the different organizations can help you, whether that's sponsorship, space, or just bringing a bit more profile to your meetup. And then I've also put in another Microsoftism, MVPs there, Microsoft MVP communities, just an example, but there are other community leaders that are profiled in many ways. What I like about the Microsoft MVP program is you can look up people by tech area. So guess what? If you're trying to set up a .NET meetup, you could have a look on the MVP list and see who's got the award for developer technologies and go from there, see where they are in the world. You can find people that could help you. And people on these programs, whether it's MVP or AWS Heroes, they are part of becoming and maintaining that status is community contributions. So of course, they're going to want to help you. Oh, and if you set up a meetup, it's a really good step in, on the journey to you becoming an MVP as well. But we'll have to save that for another talk. Thank you for joining me today. So my name is Adam Jackson. I run the partnerships, and I am also the community lead at a data consultancy called Advancing Analytics. They do Databricks, they do Microsoft Fabric, and they do AI. You can look them up. They're brilliant people. They're very community focused, which is one of the reasons why I went to work there. Previously, I worked at Green Software Foundation, and I also spent 12 or 13 years at Microsoft, most of that doing community activity, just like I've referenced. My email address is on screen, aj@advancinganalytics.co.uk. You'll also find me on LinkedIn and Blue Sky as well. And with that, I want to wish you a very happy new year, and thank you so much for joining me today. I hope we'll see you again very soon.